The sniper was hidden, his eyes locked on the target. Sergeant Alex Morgan, injured and struggling, didn't know what to do. But then Rex, his German shepherd, felt it, an instinct stronger than fear. Without hesitation, Rex sprinted forward, barking and charging into the open field, faster than the sniper could react. The bullet hit Rex in the leg, but he didn't stop. He kept running, his loyalty fueling every step. Just as the sniper prepared to fire again, Rex lunged at him, taking him down in a split second. Alex watched in disbelief as his hero, wounded but victorious, saved him once again. Was it a miracle? You won't believe what happened next. He wasn't supposed to survive. The words echoed in the cold, silent forest. Sergeant Alex Morgan, bloodied and broken, lay in the underbrush, barely conscious. The sniper's bullet had torn through his side, leaving him helpless, the world around him spinning. There was no escape, no reinforcements coming. His only hope was his dog, Rex. Rex wasn't just any dog. He was a military canine, a German shepherd with instincts that could save lives. But in this moment, Rex was the only thing standing between Alex and death. As Alex's vision blurred, he heard the sound of rustling leaves. Rex was moving, his sharp ears twitching. The scent of danger was thick in the air, and Rex knew it better than anyone. With a low growl, Rex's eyes scanned the dark, his body tensing. He could sense the sniper's presence. No one else could see him, but Rex could feel it. The sniper, hidden in the shadows, had no idea Rex was closing in. The bond between the soldier and his dog went beyond training. It was something deeper, something instinctual. As the minutes dragged on, Rex moved with precision, his body low to the ground, his senses alive with the danger that loomed. Alex, unable to move, could only watch as Rex advanced. It was a race against time, and Rex was winning. The sniper, still unaware, adjusted his position, preparing for the perfect shot. But Rex, faster than anyone could have imagined, leaped into the clearing, his body a blur of motion. The sniper's eyes widened in surprise as Rex charged forward, faster than the human eye could track. The first shot missed. Rex's speed was beyond what anyone could predict. As the sniper aimed again, Rex's instincts took over, his body twisting and darting to avoid the shot. It was a dance of survival, and Rex was leading. With a swift movement, Rex was on him, pinning the sniper down in a flash. Alex, struggling to stay conscious, could only watch in awe as his dog, his hero, took control of the situation. The sniper, once so confident in his position, now lay helpless, his weapon discarded. Rex's strength and loyalty had turned the tables. He wasn't just a dog, he was Alex's lifeline. And in that moment, the world seemed to stop. Alex's heart raced as he managed to drag himself toward Rex. His hand reached out, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he found strength in the connection they shared. Rex, panting and covered in dirt, turned his head to look at Alex. The bond between them, forged in the heat of battle, had just saved both their lives. But the story wasn't over yet. What Rex had done was more than just a rescue. It was a miracle. The question remained, could Alex survive long enough to make it out, or was this just the beginning of a fight neither of them was ready for? Alex's vision blurred, but he knew he had to keep moving. The weight of his body, heavy with blood loss, made it hard to think clearly, but his mind locked onto one thing, Rex. His German shepherd, now beside him, nudged him gently with his nose, as if telling him to stay awake. Alex's hand reached out, grasping the dog's fur with what little strength he had left. They had been through so much together. This was no different. With a low growl, Rex looked up, ears stiffened. The danger was still out there, but they had survived. Together. As Alex tried to lift himself, his head spinning, he realized how much time had passed. The sound of the forest had shifted, the birds were no longer chirping. Only silence surrounded them, a chilling reminder of how close they had come to death. The sniper was still out there, but for now, Alex and Rex had the upper hand. His fingers shook as he slowly pulled himself into a sitting position, leaning against a nearby tree. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but Rex remained by his side, watchful, unwavering. The pain in his side throbbed, but Alex ignored it. There was no time for that. Not yet. Rex padded a few steps ahead, sniffing the air. The instincts of the dog were sharper than Alex's, honed in combat. able to detect even the faintest hint of danger. Alex felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could make it out alive after all. But there was a catch. Alex had no idea where they were. The forest seemed endless, a maze of trees and shadows. His only hope was to rely on Rex's instincts to guide them out of this nightmare. Slowly, painfully, Alex rose to his feet, using the tree for support. Rex was already ahead, looking back to make sure his partner was following. With every step, Alex felt his body weakening, but he pushed through the pain. It was what he had trained for. Survival. There was no other option. As they moved through the forest, the silence became oppressive. The only sounds the rustle of leaves beneath their feet and the occasional snap of a twig. Rex's head turned sharply to the left, his ears twitching. Something was out there. Alex held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment. They had to keep moving. Rex's instincts had kept them alive so far, but now, Alex needed to trust them more than ever. The trees ahead parted, revealing a small clearing. The air was different here, fresher, but the sense of danger didn't fade. Rex stopped, his body tense, eyes scanning every corner of the clearing. Alex stood frozen, waiting for the next move. Rex turned to look at him, as if telling him it was time to act. Alex knew what he had to do. They had no choice but to continue. With a deep breath, he pushed forward, relying on Rex to guide him through whatever came next. They had survived the first challenge. Now, they would face the next together. Alex stumbled through the dense forest, his body weak, but his resolve stronger than ever. Rex, leading the way, was like a lifeline in this uncertain world. His ears perked up at every sound, his instincts guiding him through the trees. Alex's hand was pressed against his side where the bullet had torn through his flesh, but the pain was becoming a distant memory. It was Rex's presence that kept him grounded. They moved. In silence, the forest alive with the hum of insects and the rustling of leaves, but the real danger still lingered. The sniper was out there somewhere, and they were too exposed. Every step forward was a risk, but Alex had no choice. The fear that had once overwhelmed him was now replaced with a quiet determination. He wasn't just surviving for himself, he was surviving for Rex. They had been through too much together to fail now. Rex's steady movements ahead gave Alex a sense of calm, as if the dog knew exactly where they were headed. Every once in a while, Rex would glance back, checking to make sure Alex was still with him. The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. They had been through battles before, but nothing like this. As they pushed forward, Alex noticed the trees beginning to thin out, the forest opening up into a small clearing. The change in landscape was subtle, but it was a sign that they were moving in the right direction. The sunlight filtered through the branches above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. For the first time since the ambush, Alex allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. They were getting closer to safety, or at least, that's what he hoped. But the feeling of hope was fleeting. Rex stopped abruptly, his body tense, his eyes scanning the area. Alex froze, his heart racing. Something was wrong. Rex let out a low growl, his body coiled like a spring, ready to react. Alex held his breath, his senses on high alert. The air was still, but the feeling of danger was palpable. He didn't know what Rex had sensed, but he trusted the dog's instincts. Rex's low growl intensified as he moved forward, his eyes never leaving the shadows ahead. Alex followed, trying to keep his balance, his legs weak beneath him. He felt vulnerable, exposed in the open clearing. Rex's growl turned into a bark, loud and sharp, as if challenging whatever was out there. Alex's breath hitched in his throat. Was it the sniper? Had they been found? Rex's stance was unwavering, his attention fixed on the far side of the clearing. Alex stepped forward, his hand gripping Rex's collar, ready for whatever came next. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity, but then, without warning, Rex took off. The German shepherd sprinted toward the tree line, barking fiercely as if he had spotted something, or someone. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Had they found the sniper? But as he followed Rex, something unexpected happened. Rex stopped short, his body lowering to the ground in a protective stance. Alex's eyes widened as he saw what had caused the dog's sudden reaction. A small, injured animal, a deer, its leg clearly broken, was struggling to move. Rex was no longer on alert for the sniper. He had shifted into rescue mode. The dog's instincts were telling him to help, not fight. Alex knelt beside Rex, his heart swelling with a sense of pride. Even in the midst of danger, Rex's loyalty was unwavering. He wasn't just a soldier's dog. He was a protector, a healer. Alex took a deep breath, allowing himself a moment of relief. Rex had once again proven that his instincts were not just about survival. They were about compassion, about making the right choice, even in the face of fear. Together, they would survive. But Alex knew this was just one moment in a much longer journey. Rex had shown him that no matter how dark things got, there was always a way forward. And with Rex by his side, Alex believed they would make it through. Alex stood in the clearing, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched Rex carefully approach the injured deer. The small creature looked up with frightened eyes, its breath shallow, but there was something else, something fragile and precious in the way it moved. Rex, still on alert but now gentle, nudged the deer with his nose, coaxing it to move, guiding it with a calmness that Alex had seen in him many times before. It was as if Rex understood that this moment, unlike the battles they had faced, was about healing, not fighting. Slowly, Alex lowered himself to the ground, his legs shaking beneath him. The pain in his side was growing sharper again, but the sight of Rex working so effortlessly to help this helpless creature kept him focused. He knew that Rex's actions were not just instinct, but an unspoken understanding of the world around him. The world was cruel and full of danger, but Rex had shown him that even in the midst of it, there was room for kindness, for compassion. Rex had been through so much, from the battlefields to this very moment, yet his ability to care for others, no matter how small or vulnerable, never wavered. Alex watched as Rex stood guard over the deer, his amber eyes never leaving it. It was then that Alex realized just how much this dog had taught him. Rex wasn't just a fighter. He was a symbol of everything Alex had forgotten. Hope, loyalty, the willingness to do what was right, even when the world seemed to have no mercy. Alex knew they couldn't stay in the clearing forever. They had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this forest and away from the danger that still lingered. But for this moment, he allowed himself to rest, to breathe, to let Rex show him the true meaning of survival. Rex was more than just his dog. He was his partner, his protector, his reminder that the world could still be a place of miracles. And as Alex stood up slowly, pushing past the pain, he felt a spark of strength return. He wasn't alone. He had Rex. With every step they took, Alex knew the journey ahead would not be easy. But with Rex leading the way, he also knew it would be possible. Together, they would face whatever came next. The forest was still dark and dangerous, but Alex's heart was lighter, knowing that Rex had his back. The bond between them was stronger than anything the world could throw at them. And as they moved forward, one step at a time, Alex knew that no matter how impossible things seemed, they would make it through, together. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the forest as Alex and Rex moved through the trees. The air was cooler now, a sharp contrast to the heat that had gripped them earlier in the day. Alex's legs felt heavy with every step, but Rex, ever watchful, kept pushing ahead, his tail slightly wagging, his eyes scanning the path. It was as if the dog was guiding him, not just through the forest, but through the fear and pain that had clouded his mind for so long. Despite everything they had been through, despite the wounds and the uncertainty of their survival, Rex's presence was a constant source of strength. Alex couldn't remember the last time he had felt this hopeful. He had been surrounded by death before, on the battlefield, in the chaos of combat, but never had he felt this kind of peace, this quiet assurance. Rex was with him, and that made all the difference. As they continued through the forest, Alex's thoughts began to clear. The fog that had clouded his mind seemed to lift, piece by piece, with every step they took. The world felt different now. It was still dangerous, still uncertain, but there was a chance, however small, that they could make it out of this alive. The forest opened up, revealing a small creek. The sound of water rushing over rocks was soothing, a reminder that life continued, even in the midst of chaos. Rex trotted ahead, drinking from the creek, his actions calm and deliberate. Alex watched him, a sense of awe filling his chest. How could a dog, a mere animal, have such a profound effect on him? It was as if Rex had always known the way, had always known what needed to be done. Alex took a deep breath and followed Rex to the water's edge. He knelt down, cupping his hands to drink from the creek. The cold water was refreshing, and for the first time in hours, Alex felt a sense of normalcy. But the stillness of the moment was shattered when Rex suddenly barked, his body tense. Alex's heart raced as he looked up, scanning the surroundings. Had they been followed? Was the sniper still out there? Rex's eyes narrowed, his ears pricked forward, and then he darted into the woods, disappearing between the trees. Without thinking, Alex rose to his feet and followed, the pain in his side momentarily forgotten. The adrenaline coursed through his veins as he moved, his heart pounding. He didn't know what Rex had sensed, but he trusted the dog with his life. The forest seemed to close in around him as he pushed forward, following Rex's lead. Every step felt like a lifetime, but then he saw it. Rex had stopped at the base of a tree, his body crouched low to the ground. Alex approached cautiously, his hand on his weapon, ready for anything. And then, through the underbrush, Alex saw it. A small, dark shape, barely visible in the fading light. It was another soldier, no more than a few feet away, their face hidden in shadow. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Was this a trap? Had the sniper returned? But as he looked closer, he saw the uniform. It was a U.S. Marine, a survivor like him. Rex, sensing the danger was over, relaxed and sat beside Alex, his body no longer tense. The Marines slowly stood, their hands raised in surrender, eyes wide with relief. "I thought I was the only one left," the Marine said, their voice hoarse. Alex lowered his weapon, the realization dawning on him. They were not alone. In this vast, unforgiving forest, there were still others who had survived the same horrors. And together, they would make it out. But for now, Alex knew one thing for certain. They were one step closer to safety, and it was because of Rex. The bond they shared, forged in battle, had led them through the darkest of times. And with Rex by his side, Alex believed they could face anything the world had left to throw at them. The air was thick with tension as Alex and the other Marines slowly made their way through the forest, Rex trotting along beside them. The quiet between them was uneasy, the kind of silence that only comes after a shared experience of survival, the kind that neither of them could put into words. The other Marine, whose name Alex learned was Sergeant Brian Jacobs, had been trapped in the woods for days, moving from one hiding spot to the next, always looking over his shoulder. His eyes were tired, haunted, but there was a flicker of hope in them now, the kind that Alex hadn't seen in so long. Rex, ever watchful, stayed by Alex's side, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. They had been in this situation before, but now there were two of them, and Rex's instinct to protect had shifted into overdrive. As they walked, the forest began to clear, and Alex felt a strange sense of familiarity in the direction they were heading. It wasn't the first time he had walked these paths. It wasn't even the first time he had felt this close to death, but something about this moment felt different. The weight of everything they had been through seemed to settle into his bones, yet there was still a spark of life left in him. He could feel it in the way Rex moved, in the way his dog's paws hit the ground. With purpose, like they were headed toward something. Alex glanced at Jacobs, who had been eerily quiet since they first met. His face was drawn, his uniform torn and stained, but his eyes were sharp. "You've been out here a long time, haven't you?" Alex asked, his voice hoarse from the lack of water and rest. Jacobs nodded, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Too long," he muttered, his eyes scanning the surrounding trees. "I thought I was the only one left. I didn't know what happened to the others." Alex could feel the weight of those words. There were times when he felt the same way, when he thought he might never see another human face again. But now, here they were, together. "You're not alone," Alex said, the words more to himself than to Jacobs. "We're going to make it out of here." Jacobs gave him a small, tired smile. "I hope so." Rex, as if sensing the moment of reassurance, let out a low bark and nudged Alex's leg with his nose. The sound of it broke the stillness of the forest, and for a moment, Alex felt a glimmer of peace. It was a small thing, but it was enough to remind him that they were still fighting. The path before them wasn't easy, and Alex knew it wouldn't be over soon. But the forest no longer felt as suffocating. With Rex leading the way and Jacobs by his side, Alex finally allowed himself to believe that survival was possible. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was hope in the air. They weren't just walking through the woods anymore. They were moving towards something. Together, they would survive. Together, they would make it out. The forest around them had started to thin out as Alex, Rex, and Sergeant Jacobs made their way through the dense underbrush. The sun had nearly set, painting the sky with soft hues of orange and pink, casting a surreal glow over the path ahead. The air was cooler now, and Alex's breath was steady, though his body still felt heavy with fatigue. The pain in his side had dulled somewhat, the adrenaline keeping him moving, but he knew he couldn't keep going forever. His thoughts drifted back to the days before everything changed, before the ambush, before the war, when life was simpler. But those thoughts were fleeting. He had to focus. There was no going back. Jacobs walked quietly beside him, his face set in a grim expression. The two men had barely exchanged words since their encounter in the clearing. But there was something comforting about the silence, something unspoken that made it easier to keep moving. Rex, as always, was leading the way, his ears alert, his eyes scanning the horizon. The dog had an uncanny sense of direction, and Alex had learned to trust him with his life. Suddenly, Rex stopped. His body froze in place, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. Alex held his breath, waiting for a sign. Was it danger? Or something else? Rex's eyes locked onto a point ahead of them. He started moving again, but this time with a new purpose. His steps were deliberate, calculated. Jacobs, sensing the shift, followed suit, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle slung across his back. Alex couldn't help but wonder if they had finally reached the edge of the forest, the boundary that would lead them to safety. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The world wasn't that kind. The days of peace were gone. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding a way to live through all of it. As they moved forward, Rex's alertness never wavered. The dog was as sharp as ever, his senses tuned to every subtle sound in the forest. They walked on in silence, each step carrying them deeper into the unknown. Minutes passed, then hours. The tension in the air was palpable, but no one spoke. It was as if the forest itself had fallen silent, as if it knew something they didn't. But then, as they rounded a bend in the trail, a clearing appeared before them. The ground was flat, the trees spaced out, the sky above just a little bit clearer. And there, in the distance, Alex saw something that made his heart skip a beat. There was a small cabin, tucked away at the edge of the clearing. It looked old, weathered, but there was no mistaking it. It was a place where people lived. It was the first sign of civilization they had seen in days. Alex felt a surge of hope. Could this be it? Could this be the place where they could finally rest, where they could heal? He glanced at Jacobs, who nodded quietly, a faint trace of relief on his face. But Rex, always vigilant, stayed alert, his body tense as he led them forward. They were close, but Alex knew better than to get ahead of himself. Not yet. They hadn't made it out of the woods. Not until they were safe. The cabin was still a long way off, but Alex's heart raced with anticipation. This could be the moment they had been waiting for. Together, they would make it there. But as Rex continued to guide them, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge was still to come. The forest wasn't done with them yet. There was still a long road ahead, but with Rex by his side, Alex was ready for whatever came next. As Alex, Jacobs, and Rex approached the cabin, the sense of relief began to settle over them. The last few days had been a blur of fear and survival, but now, there was something different in the air. The small cabin in the clearing, though worn and weathered, promised something they hadn't felt in what seemed like forever: safety. Alex's steps quickened, driven by the hope that this was the end of their journey through the wilderness. His muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed through, following Rex as the dog led them closer. The cabin's wooden walls were weather-beaten and its roof sagged in places, but it was still standing. The sight of it made Alex's chest tighten. They had made it. Jacobs was a few steps behind, his face still tense, but his pace had picked up as well. Even Rex, usually so focused on the task at hand, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. His steps were lighter, his tail swaying slowly behind him as he moved. They were almost there. Alex reached out and touched the door handle, his fingers shaking as he turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air inside smelled of dust and old wood, but it was a welcome scent compared to the harshness of the forest. As they stepped inside, Alex felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in days, he could relax, even if just for a moment. The room was sparse, with a single wooden table and a couple of chairs. A fireplace sat against the far wall, the remnants of a fire still faintly visible in the ashes. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. It was home. Jacobs moved in next, looking around the room with a wary eye. He didn't trust much these days, but there was something about the cabin that gave him a sense of calm. Rex walked to the center of the room, circling once before lying down with a soft sigh, his eyes still scanning the space. The dog wasn't entirely at ease, but even he seemed to know they were safe for now. Alex moved to the window and looked out at the clearing, the trees gently swaying in the breeze. The sunlight was dimming, the sky now painted in hues of purple and orange. The world outside felt distant now, almost unreal. They had come so far, through so much. Alex could hardly believe they had made it this far. He turned back to Jacobs, who was now sitting by the table, staring at the floor in quiet contemplation. "We made it," Alex said quietly, almost to himself. Jacobs nodded slowly, his gaze lifting to meet Alex's. "Yeah," he replied, his voice rough. "I guess we did." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of the last few days settling between them. There was no need to say more. They had survived together, against all odds. And as night began to fall, Alex allowed himself to sit down beside Rex. The dog raised his head, looking at Alex with those familiar amber eyes. There was something in that look, something that said they weren't done yet, that the fight wasn't over, but they had made it this far, together. It was enough for now. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alex closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion take over. They had made it this far. Tomorrow would come, and with it, whatever challenges awaited. But for now, they were safe. And that was enough. The first rays of dawn filtered through the small cabin's dusty windows, casting a soft glow across the room. Alex slowly opened his eyes, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. The silence in the cabin was comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos they had lived through. Rex was lying on the floor, his body curled up protectively, still alert, even in sleep. Jacobs was already awake, sitting by the small table, quietly sipping from a tin cup. The fire had long since burned out, but the warmth from the embers lingered in the air. Alex stretched slowly, his muscles sore, his side still tender where the bullet had torn through. He winced but pushed through it, determined to stay strong. He stood up and moved toward the window, looking out at the forest that surrounded them. The clearing was peaceful, the kind of stillness that made it hard to believe they had come from such a harsh reality. He could feel the tension in his chest slowly easing, the sense of safety wrapping around him like a warm blanket. The worst was over for now, but Alex knew it wouldn't last forever. He turned back toward the room, his eyes meeting Jacob's tired gaze. "We need to figure out our next move," Alex said, his voice hoarse but steady. Jacobs nodded, looking down at the empty cup in his hands. "Yeah, I know," he replied. "But for now, we've got a little time. We can rest, at least for today." Alex didn't argue. He knew they had earned the rest. The last few days had been grueling, and neither of them had a moment to breathe. For once, they could let their guard down, at least for a little while. Rex stirred as if on cue, lifting his head to look at Alex, his amber eyes sharp and observant. Alex smiled softly and walked over to the dog, ruffling the fur on his neck. Rex's tail gave a slight wag, his way of acknowledging the bond between them. "Good boy," Alex muttered, grateful beyond words for the loyalty and strength Rex had shown. Jacob stood up then, stretching his stiff limbs. "I'll check the perimeter," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who couldn't stop being cautious, even now. Alex nodded. "I'll help. We need to know what's around here." Rex stood up with them, his ears perked, ready for whatever came next. As they stepped outside, the cool morning air hit Alex's face, refreshing and clear. The forest was still, the only sounds the rustling of leaves in the gentle wind. They moved cautiously, keeping close to the cabin, each step measured. The day ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Alex didn't feel completely alone. They had made it this far, and with Rex and Jacobs by his side, he believed they could make it further. The forest was large, and the dangers were still out there, but this place, this cabin, was their refuge for now. It was enough. They didn't need answers to everything just yet. For today, survival was their only goal. As they circled the perimeter, Alex glanced back at the cabin. It felt like a new beginning. The road ahead was unknown, but it wasn't as terrifying as it had been. They would keep moving forward, step by step. The weight of the world might still press on them, but together, they could carry it. Rex stopped suddenly, his nose twitching in the air. Alex froze, his instincts kicking in. Was something out there? Rex's body was tense, his ears pinned back. "What is it, boy?" Alex whispered, stepping closer to the dog. Rex looked back at him, his gaze unblinking. Then, without warning, the dog bolted forward, dashing through the trees. Alex and Jacobs exchanged a quick glance before they both ran after him. What was Rex sensing? The tension in the air was thick, but Alex couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity and instinct. They had survived this far. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Alex and Jacobs rushed through the trees, following Rex as he darted ahead with incredible speed. The dog's movements were precise, every step calculated as if he knew exactly where he was headed. Alex's heart raced in his chest, his legs burning from the exertion, but he didn't slow down. He trusted Rex with his life, and right now, Rex was leading them towards something important. Jacobs was close behind, his breath heavy but steady, clearly determined to keep up. The forest was dense, but Rex's instincts cut through the wilderness like a knife. They pushed through thickets of brush and low-hanging branches, the smell of pine and damp earth filling the air. Despite the urgency of the moment, Alex couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm. The bond between him and Rex was undeniable, and in this moment, the dog seemed to be the one guiding them to safety, not the other way around. As they approached a small rise in the land, Rex stopped dead in his tracks. His body went rigid, his nose twitching as he scanned the area. Alex slowed, his eyes narrowing, trying to see what had caught the dog's attention. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. There was something out there, something moving in the shadows, just beyond the trees. Rex let out a low growl, his ears flat against his head, his muscles coiled and ready. Alex raised his hand, signaling Jacobs to stop. They stood in silence, listening intently. The only sound was the wind rustling through the leaves. Then, as if on cue, a figure stepped out from behind a tree. It was a man, dressed in worn military gear, his face dirty and weathered from days of being in the forest. His eyes were wide with surprise, as if he hadn't expected to find anyone else alive. "Who's there?" the man called out, his voice hoarse and trembling. Alex stepped forward, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to hurt you," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We're survivors, just like you." The man eyed them warily, his gaze flicking to Rex, who stood at attention, still on alert. You're not with them?" the man asked, his voice thick with confusion. "Who?" Jacobs asked, stepping forward cautiously. "The others," the man replied, his eyes scanning the trees around them. "The ones who came through here, they weren't looking for survivors. They were looking for us. To finish the job." Alex's heart sank. The tension in the air was thick, and for a moment, it felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath. Rex growled again, but this time it was more of a warning. The man seemed to relax slightly, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "I've been hiding for days," he said quietly. "I thought I was the only one left. I don't know how much longer I can keep running." Alex could see the fear in the man's eyes, the same fear that had been in his own when they were first caught in this nightmare. "You're not alone," Alex said firmly. "We're getting out of here. Together." The man looked at Alex, then at Jacobs, and finally at Rex. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes, but it was brief, as if he wasn't sure whether to believe it. "Together," he repeated softly. Alex nodded. "Together," he confirmed. The forest around them was still, the weight of their situation pressing down on them, but Alex knew this was a turning point. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were moving forward, and they were doing it together. Rex stood beside him, ever watchful, and Alex felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would make it out of this. All of them. As the sun began to rise higher, casting a pale light over the forest, Alex felt the weight of the journey ahead. It would be difficult. It would be dangerous. But they were no longer alone. And with Rex by his side, Alex knew that, together, they could face whatever came next. The group moved cautiously, with Alex leading the way, his senses alert to every sound in the forest. The man who had appeared in the clearing, Sergeant Thomas Webb, had reluctantly joined them. Though he had been hesitant at first, there was a shared understanding between the three men. They were survivors, and in this moment, that was enough. Rex walked confidently ahead, his keen senses guiding them as he always did. His eyes were sharp, and his tail swayed slightly, a sign that he felt the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still thick in the air, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. The constant weight of fear had lightened a little. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Alex's eyes scanned the forest, his instincts sharpening as they moved deeper into the wilderness. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but there was no sign of danger yet. Sergeant Webb, despite his initial wariness, now seemed to be adjusting to the group. He kept his distance, but had started to follow their lead, trusting Rex's abilities and Alex's quiet authority. "How far do you think we are from the nearest town?" Webb asked, his voice low but edged with anxiety. Alex considered the question for a moment, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "Hard to say," he answered, "but we need to stay sharp. This forest is vast, and there's no guarantee that anyone else is still out there." Webb nodded, his eyes darting around the trees. "Right," he said. "Guess we'll just keep moving and hope for the best." Rex stopped abruptly, his ears standing tall as he sniffed the air. Alex's heart skipped a beat, his mind immediately on high. Alert. Was it a predator? Or something else? Webb, noticing the change in Rex's posture, froze in place. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex held up a hand, signaling him to stay silent. The dog's body was tense, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. Rex slowly crept forward, his movements calculated, like a shadow stalking its prey. Alex and Webb exchanged a brief glance before following Rex. Every step felt heavier now, the forest pressing in on them. They moved cautiously, stepping lightly over the uneven ground. Rex led them through the underbrush, and the air grew still. There was a palpable sense of anticipation as they moved closer to whatever had caught Rex's attention. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Alex saw it, movement. A figure, barely visible through the trees, was watching them. It was too still, too silent. Alex's heart raced again, but this time, he wasn't paralyzed by fear. He was ready. Rex stopped in his tracks, his body low to the ground. The figure hadn't moved, but Alex was sure it was aware of their presence. He stepped forward cautiously, his hand still near his weapon, but his instincts told him to wait. It was a person, another survivor. Rex gave a quiet whine, a sound that seemed almost relieved. The figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. It was a young woman, her face pale and drawn from exhaustion. Her clothes were torn, and her eyes were wide, filled with fear and confusion. She didn't speak immediately, just stared at Alex and Webb, as if unsure whether they were a threat. Alex lowered his hand, trying to convey calm. "We're not here to hurt you," he said softly. "We're just trying to survive, like you." The woman's eyes flickered between the two men and then to Rex, who was still standing at attention, his gaze fixed on her. Slowly, she nodded, her breath shaky. I thought I was the only one," she whispered. Alex offered her a small, reassuring smile. "You're not alone," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "We're in this together." The woman's lips trembled, but she seemed to find some strength in his words. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving Rex. "Thank you," she said softly. Alex's heart swelled with a mix of pride and hope. Despite everything they had been through, despite the odds stacked against them, they had found another person, another survivor. Rex gave a soft bark, as if acknowledging the woman's presence, and Alex couldn't help but smile. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. They had come so far, and now they were one step closer to finding safety, together. The woman, who had introduced herself as Sarah, stood by the group, still taking in the reality of the situation. She was clearly exhausted, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and disbelief, but there was a fire in her that hadn't been extinguished yet. Alex could see the same resilience in her that he'd seen in himself, in Jacobs, and in Rex. She was a fighter. They had come across many survivors in their time, but something about Sarah's quiet strength made Alex believe that she would be just fine. "How long have you been out here?" Jacobs asked, breaking the silence as they all stood by the cabin, catching their breath. Sarah glanced up at him, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "Too long," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I was part of a recon unit. We were supposed to be extracted, but things went south. I've been hiding ever since. Alex nodded, understanding all too well. There was something about this forest, something that made you feel isolated even when you weren't alone. It could consume you if you let it. You're safe now, Alex said, his voice firm but kind. Sarah gave a small smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. She was grateful, but her mind was still far away, caught in the memories of everything she'd been through. Rex, sensing the shift in her mood, walked up to her, sitting quietly by her side. She looked down at the dog, her eyes softening as she reached out to pet him. "Thank you, Rex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Rex gave a low wag of his tail, his eyes warm and understanding. Alex couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for the dog. Rex had been his lifeline, and now he was offering the same to someone else. "We should rest while we can," Jacob suggested, breaking the quiet moment. "It won't be long before we need to move again." Alex agreed, feeling the weight of their situation slowly settle back into his shoulders. He looked at Sarah, then at Jacob's, and finally at Rex, who had already curled up on the floor to sleep. The forest beyond the cabin was quiet, but the danger never really left. They couldn't afford to grow complacent, but for now, they had a moment of peace. As the day passed, the tension in the group eased, but Alex knew that the hardest part of their journey was still ahead. They would need to move soon, to find a way out of this wilderness before it swallowed them whole. He sat down near the window, keeping watch, his mind working through their options. Rex stirred in his sleep, his ears twitching, as if sensing the unease that still lingered. Alex watched him for a moment, then looked back to Sarah and Jacobs. "We'll figure it out," Alex muttered to himself, more as a reassurance than anything else. "We've made it this far. We'll make it out." The quiet night settled around them, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. They had survived the wilderness so far, but would they survive what lay ahead? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: together, they had a fighting chance.